I want to welcome you to the first session, titled Coming Together. This is all about unity. And I believe this is kind of the base of, or the foundation for marriages. Like this, he says, one of the saddest reasons a marriage dies is that neither spouse recognizes its value until it's too late. And I know that when we get into conflictual situations, that sometimes we don't think about the value of the marriage at that moment. We're just in a fight. We're putting up the fist. We got the boxing gloves on. We're going for a fight. So we don't think about the value. We need to think about what it means to be married and what a marriage actually is. When we get into a place of conflict and it drives our marriage to a place of failure, or close to failure, it's not just affecting the couple, it's affecting everyone in the household, everyone in the system. So our kids are really suffering from this. So the idea is to not throw our hands up and say, well, I'm going to divorce because of the kids, because of our relationship is in such shambles that I don't want to hurt the kids, so I'm going to divorce. Why don't we turn it and say, for the kids and for our marriage, we're going to make this work. We're going to do the necessary things that it takes to build this marriage instead of let it fail. Promote the idea that when we become husband and wife, that we walk step by step together. It was never meant for a person to be alone. Once we got married, it was never meant that we lost all of our identity and that we lost everything about ourselves, but that we had to come together and we look totally different. We still get to maintain our autonomy. The unity is displaying one's own created autonomy. This idea of unity is that I get to display my own created autonomy, but remain in step with my mate. Uniformity is different. Uniformity is the lack of diversity at the point of becoming exactly the same. When I was in the Marine Corps, there was nothing about unity with all of our recruits. It was all about uniformity. In fact, I didn't want to do what they told me to do because it was abrasive. But when you saw that group of individuals marching down the parade deck, man, they were in step. They looked the same. They turned the same direction. They looked tight. They were making the same sound with their feet. As the drill instructor called out cadence, everybody followed him and they turned. And in the entire time, most of them were in conflict with each other. Some of them hated each other, but it was uniformity. They were not allowed, in the service, we weren't allowed to think. They thought for you. They told you what to do. And everything was in uniformity, in uniform. They weren't in unity, because unity is different. Unity is whenever we can preserve our diversity, but we still march at the same step together. The way we acquire this unity, there's a way that we acquire it and still keep our independence. And the way that we do that is we have to understand and embrace diversities, or embrace our differences. And I believe that there's three main differences in individuals. And the first difference that we see in individuals is this. It's gender. If you're around your spouse for 2 seconds, you're going to understand that there's a difference in gender. Guys, sometimes we find these little pockets in our mind and we go there and we can stay there. If we go to a little pocket in our mind, and it might be hunting, it might be fishing, it might be your job, it may be something, it may be sports. And when you go there, your wife tries to tell you something and you cannot get out of that pocket. She can think about a million different things at once. Here's the funny part, is that, and you can relate to this, at night when you get ready to go to bed, here's what the husband says. It's time to go to bed. I'm going to bed. So what does he do? He goes to bed. And he goes to sleep. Here's what the wife does. It's time to go to bed. I'm going to bed. As she walks through the house, she picks up all the clothes and makes sure that everything's set in place. She goes in the laundry room to make sure that all of the, we don't want to leave clothes in the washer, right? They'll spoil overnight, so we got to make sure they're in the dryer. We go through this whole house picking up stuff, getting ready. We get to bed, lay down, and decide that you forgot something. You get up and you go take care of it. You forgot your list for tomorrow, and everything's going through your head all at once, and you're freaking out because then when you get to bed, you can't go to sleep. And he's already snoring. This is the difference. So there's gender differences. The second difference is our personalities. And here's the good thing, is that opposites do really attract. You're glad that other person is opposite at certain times, and we'll talk about that in just a moment, but the personalities are so different. Now, I believe that personalities kind of evolve over time. After you've been married for a while, I see personalities change just a little bit, and even from the time when you were younger, if you can remember this, that your personality's kind of evolved over time. It's changed somewhat, but for the most part, you're still the same person. As we were dating, as we were courting each other over the years before we got married, you know, we looked at these personalities, these little quirks, and we was like, oh, those things are so cute. And oh, guess what he does? He does this. His personality is so awesome. And then, boy, does it change when we get married. Well, the third one is this. First, we have gender and personality. The third thing that's one of the main differences between a husband and wife is the embedded family of origin environment. The way you were brought up at home. Things that were different when you were raised up. The things that were different in your homes. And you move into this new home with this spouse. You're pumped about getting married. You're pumped about moving into this home, and all of a sudden they do something different than you were raised up. They put the cereal box below the cabinet when it goes above the refrigerator. That doesn't go there, and it causes an argument because it goes above the refrigerator. No, it goes over here, and so they argue about where the cereal box goes. Because really the differences are what attract a couple at the onset of the relationship, but it's the differences that become the biggest challenge after we're married. We say things like, why can't you just be more like me? Well, 10 years ago, we were infatuated with the differences. Oh, they're so cute. Can you see that look that he has on his face, or that little laugh that she has? And now, 10 years later, that stinking laugh is driving me up the wall. You give me that look every time. I'm sick of that look. But it's these differences that attract us in the onset, but it's also the differences that cause the most conflict throughout the marriage. This is how we fall into unity or come into unity with each other, is that we submit to one another and be subject to one another, that we march in the same step, the same beat of the drum, but we get to maintain our personalities. If we want to come into unity as a couple, I believe there's an element that's been missing from our couples. We go to all this counseling, and I am a counselor, I'm a therapist, I see a lot of couples. They come in and we teach them all of these tools, these methods, and these procedures that they can do in their families, in their homes, to bring their marriage back into alignment. But here's what I'm finding out, and one of the things that John Gottman has studied and proved, there's not a lot of effectiveness in just going to a counselor and finding out tools, methods. But what he is finding out is this, that there's an element of friendship that's being lost between a husband and wife. See, I believe this is the key thing for unity, is friendship. We're losing our friend. What we've done is we've gained a roommate. Take the kids to sports. We go to church. We do all the necessary things in life side by side with each other, and they become a roommate with us. We're doing life together when really we need to spend some time face to face together and start the friendship all over again. We're losing the element of being friends. Go back to when you first started dating. What did it look like? What did you do? Did you take a drive out to somewhere and just sit? Listen to this. You did this same thing. You get on the phone and you're like, oh, you're the best. You're the greatest. And then at the end of that conversation, you're like, no, you hang up. No, you hang up. No, you hang up first. And it's this silence. Have you ever just been on the phone and just dead silence for a while because you don't have anything to talk about, but you just don't want to hang up? My wife and I, when we were dating, I was in the Marine Corps, and I was thousands of miles away, and back in those days, they had what they call a payphone. I know that some of you don't know what that is, but it was a payphone. You actually put money in to this phone, and you didn't take pictures with it, you couldn't text on it, but you talked on it. And I would call her from thousands of miles away. And when I would get on the phone with her, we would talk sometimes for an hour or more. But a lot of that there was silence. But we just didn't want to hang that phone up. And that's the kind of friendship I'm talking about. You can even remember songs that you heard when you were dating, you were driving, and you were going out on dates, and you remember these songs. And back in my day, it was like the songs of the 80s. Yeah, the 80s. And so when you hear those songs, what does a song do? It takes you back to that moment and that time. Maybe there's even smells of where you went out and I don't know if some of you go out and you do campfires and you would go out and sit by the lake, and maybe you cooked one of your favorite meals or went to your favorite restaurant, and you can even smell those smells, and it reminds you of those moments where you sat and you were friends. And so we tell couples, go back to those moments. Go back to those times in your relationship and just go out some night and sit in your car out by the lake and turn on, maybe you're not the 80s, maybe you're the 90s. Turn on some 90s music that you used to listen to and start hearing those sounds and reliving that friendship all over again and rebuilding that friendship. I believe it's key to building. And we do that through, John Gottman says, through like these love maps. A love map creates unity. They're the most basic. A love map is the most basic level of friendship. For instance, if you take off out on a journey here and maybe you're traveling with some friends and you're in separate vehicles and you're going at separate times, and you tell that person, if you're like me, you want to map out the entire trip and everything's got to fall into place. You know, I'm one of those nerds that you want to plan it. Everything's got to be planned. You just can't just get in the road and take off. It's got to be planned. So you plan this trip. You're going to stop at these points throughout the trip. Okay, so you plan these points, and each point is a designation spot where you meet up in unity together before you take off for the next point. But you map those out, and each point is like we're going to go from point A to point B, and this is how we're going to get there. So this point is we're going to show up at the same time, and we're going to be in unity. So these love maps are a lot like that. These love maps gives us points of reference from A to B that gives us points that we can show up at and stay in unity with our mate, with our spouse. Love maps help you feel like your partner is truly interested in you and that you are truly interested in your partner. How many times do we pass up moments like this because we're just living life together, we're married, and we miss opportunities to really make our mate or our spouse really, truly believe that we're interested in their life. What are love maps? Well, one of them would be this. Know some of your partner's worries. Know some of your partner's worries. How many times have we sit down as a couple and just ask, what are you worried about today? What are you worried about in the next 5 or 10 years? What is it that bothers you? What is it that our finances, so to speak, what is it that worries you about that? What does it worry about our jobs? Just anything that worries them, find out. The second thing would be is to know some of your partner's hopes. What are you hoping for? What are you hoping for in our life? What are you hoping for in you personally? And the third thing is know some of your partner's dreams. What are your partner's dreams? This is a perfect opportunity on a date night is to go out and sit down, not talk about the kids, not be in conflict, not talk about the parents' job or those things, but talk about, babe, what are you dreaming about? Where do you want us to be in 5 years? Where do you want us to be in 10 years? Where do you want us to be when we retire? What is your dream vacation? Where, if we took a vacation, money was unlimited, time was unlimited. Where is your dream vacation? Where would you want to go spend time, just you and me? And love maps requires 3 stages. First of all, we have to ask open-ended questions. Open-ended questions that you're interested in. For instance, what are your dreams? That's open-ended. But here's the second thing, that when we begin to learn about those dreams, about those hopes and all those worries and different things like that, then we need to remember the answers. Guys, we need to remember, come on guys, remember the answer. Guys are probably we're lame, guys. We're lame on this. We hear something and we forget it within a few minutes. But we do remember things that we connect to or that we're interested in. If we have to write it down then. We know that the personality difference or the gender difference is that the wife normally doesn't forget anything for weeks upon weeks at a time. She remembers things 20 years ago. You go into a party and she looks across the room, she scans the room. Men just walk in, they just want to know where the food bar is. She scans the room and she can see everything happening, and then 20 years later she says, you remember that lady at that party, she had red shoes on. You're like, what party? If you're gonna do something for your wife for the next few weeks, make a note. Make a note on your calendar and it will remind you. In fact, it will remind you 15 minutes prior, 30 minutes, an hour. And you wives are like, well, if he does that, then that just kind of takes the authenticity out of it. If he has to write down everything. Listen, be thankful that he's writing you down in his calendar, because it means that he wants to create a unified marriage. The third thing is, once we remember the answers, is to keep asking new questions. But get to a point in your marriage where you start practicing these love maps and bring unity back in your marriage. It can be done. Let's get unified as couples.